Democrats that include possible presidential contenders rallying as we speak outside of the U.S. Supreme Court. This on the day that moderate Republican appointee Anthony Kennedy announced his upcoming retirement from the high bench, with Donald Trump set to appoint a more conservative successor. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has signaled his intent to hold a confirmation vote before the midterm elections in November. Catherine Viette has more.
A pivotal moment for the future of the Supreme Court. With the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy, the 9-panel makeup of 5 conservatives and 4 liberals could see the balance shift even further to the right, affecting the court's rulings for decades to come. Senators on both sides are gearing up for an ugly confirmation fight.
It's imperative that the president's nominee be considered fairly and not subjected to personal attacks.
Despite being appointed by Republican President Ronald Reagan, over his 30-year career, Kennedy established himself as a swing voter, siding with both conservatives and liberals on the court.
It's worth remembering that Justice Kennedy wasn't moderate on everything. He was a conservative who was moderate or even liberal on certain issues. So on those issues, you can expect there to be a fairly substantial shift.
So what could a post-Kennedy Supreme Court look like? It would be more likely to overturn Roe v. Wade, the landmark case granting abortion rights, and possibly allow states to ban most or all abortions. It would be more likely to ban race-based affirmative action. Regarding prison reform, it could reject limiting or abolishing solitary confinement and reject challenges to capital punishment. Kennedy's largest legacy, his record on expanding gay rights, including the swing vote on the 5-4 decision deciding same-sex marriage, could also come under fire. The next court may rule in favor of religious challenges to anti-discrimination laws, thus chipping away at some of the gay rights granted in past rulings. On issues such as gun rights, campaign finance, and voting rights, Kennedy joined with his conservative justices, so expect little change from the court going forward.
Well, for more, let's cross now to Washington. Former U.S. federal prosecutor Eric Lisann joins us. Thank you for speaking with us on France 24.
My pleasure.
How will the nomination or the appointment of a new U.S. Supreme Court judge impact the wider world?
It impacts it because the U.S. is a leader in so many areas, both legally and culturally, and questions that involve both legal and cultural concerns inevitably percolate up to the Supreme Court. And there, the decisions of these 9 justices influence what happens in the United States, but also throughout the world. So it really does have a significant impact. We can see, for example, on gay rights, where Justice Kennedy sort of dissented from the conservative bloc and was the quote-unquote swing vote in establishing the right to marriage in the United States legal system, that had an effect throughout the world. So we're going to see this type of ruling come up again and be challenged in the years to come, and this will play out overseas as well, as other countries and cultures look at how things are done in the United States and make their own decisions politically and legally accordingly with that as context.
Does a more conservative U.S. Supreme Court, reflect the trend in the United States more broadly?
You're asking some good questions here, Francois. It does not seem to reflect it, but that's a really difficult thing to answer. We have upcoming midterm elections at which this will be squarely placed before the electorate, and for that reason, the Democrats have said, let's not rush here. Let's wait until after these elections, just as the Republicans insisted the country do with the replacement of Justice Scalia, which he was replaced by ultimately a very conservative justice, but only after Donald Trump was elected, which delayed things for a year. The Democrats are saying, now that that precedent has been established, we should wait just a few months here and find out really what it is that the country wants us to do. But we can see already from the results of the primaries that there's a growing tendency in some districts to go way to the left, or much more progressive or liberal than where the Supreme Court is right now. But in other places, we aren't seeing that. So this is all reflective of the polarization in the United States.
Yeah, a lot of jockeying. And tell us about the timing. Why did Anthony Kennedy choose now?
That is another very good question. Typically, the justices do wait until the end of the term of their Supreme Court term, which just ended yesterday, to make these kinds of announcements. He's 81 years old, and the effects on his health and the time away from his family has been rumored for some time to be playing a part in his decision. It's also been speculated that he really wanted to be replaced by a Republican president because he was nominated by a Republican, Ronald Reagan. But the brand of conservatism back then is very different than the brand of conservatism here. Nonetheless, he wanted to stay, perhaps, we can only speculate, with a Republican administration, and we don't know to what extent he was considering the imminence of these midterm elections, which could play a tremendous role in who his successor is. So if he wanted to get it in before the midterms and be assured that there was still a Republican majority, he had to make the announcement now. If he waited one more term, the country would have been perhaps, we don't know until the elections take place, of course, but the country would have been perhaps governed by a Democratic majority in the Senate, which would have influenced greatly his successor. So the president is certainly saying that Justice Kennedy wanted President Trump to play a great role in picking him and the Republican Party to have great leeway. Justice Kennedy himself has not explained himself on that, so we're left to speculate.
One final question for you, Eric. I'm seeing a lot of politicians from the Democratic opposition particularly concerned over a possible overturning of the 1973 legalization of abortion in the United States under a new U.S. Supreme Court justice. Could that really happen?
Exactly. That is the number one concern that Democrats and others who are concerned about this issue have. It absolutely could happen because President Trump made it a central part of his campaign, a central promise of his campaign, that he would appoint justices who were inextricably opposed to abortion rights and that would overturn Roe v. Wade. So there's 4 justices already who have signaled through their prior jurisprudence that they would be open to that happening. The only block to that was Justice Kennedy. This was one of the areas where he would swing on, although he was largely conservative. By no means was he not a conservative. But on this issue, along with a few others, he would agree with the more liberal justices of the court that Roe v. Wade should not be overturned. However, if he's replaced with somebody, say, like Neil Gorsuch, who the Republicans installed last year, that new justice will provide the 5th vote on the court to overturn Roe v. Wade. So this is absolutely something that very realistically could happen and is something that will therefore be highlighted in the political debates that are coming up in the weeks and months ahead.
Eric Lisann, many thanks for joining us from Washington, D.C.
Thank you.